the final round of questions. We'll take 2 questions from each side together, and then we'll request Minister and Secretary of State to respond. Manas from this side.
Secretary Rubio, after 25 years of very significant progress in India-US ties, including during President Trump's first tenure as the president, many in India feel that the relationship has lost the momentum in the last 1 year over issues including tariffs, a more transactional US approach, and mixed signals on Pakistan and China. So how do you see these views, and what is your administration doing to address these concerns about a slide in India-US relations? And to Foreign Minister Jaishankar, what are India's expectations from the Trump administration at this stage of the relationship, when we are also facing the consequences of conflicts, geopolitical headwinds, especially on our energy security?
Reza.
Thank you for doing this. Question for Secretary Rubio. Here, Secretary Rubio. There are serious concerns in New Delhi over the US administration's renewed engagement with Pakistan, and especially Pakistan's military leadership, especially when there are concerns in this region about that military leadership's links with terrorism and also with regional instability. How would you reassure India that this new engagement is not at India's expense? And a question for the External Affairs Minister. I know you've kind of touched on this, but the Quad came together and positioned itself as a platform for coordination between 4 maritime democracies to work on the delivery of public goods across the Indo-Pacific. How much is this still relevant with the Trump administration?
We go to the other side. Tom from BBC.
Thank you very much. Tom Bateman from the BBC. Mr. Secretary, there's a lot of attention at the moment on how to end this war, but there is continued scrutiny on the way it began. Now, it was information about the whereabouts of the Supreme Leader that led to these, unprecedented strikes of unprecedented scale. That was a Saturday in Iran in the morning when millions of children were at school. Now, Admiral Cooper said last week, confirmed the timeline of the investigation into the Manab school strike. There was media analysis that 22 schools at least were damaged either that day or in the following weeks. What do you say to those who will accuse the administration of unleashing a reckless action because of when this war was begun? And Mr. External Affairs Minister, given how hard the energy crisis is currently hitting your country, did you discuss with your American counterparts further sanctions waivers, particularly on Russian oil and other oil purchases? Thank you.
Mr. Eric.
Thank you. Secretary Rubio, I'd like to ask you, there's been a lot of celebration of the role of the US as the world's oldest democracy and of India as the world's largest democracy. As part of this discussion of democracy, what is your view on the continued discussion in the US as to who won the 2020 US election and those who continue to question the result that was certified by Congress? Is that appropriate, and is it appropriate for, or should all sides in democracies accept the results of elections? And Minister Jaishankar, if you could talk about specifically on the issue of energy purchases, Secretary Rubio has referred to the U.S. desire to sell more energy to India. Has India made any concrete commitments regarding purchase of U.S. energy as an additional source, or as India pursues increased diversification? Thank you.
So we can take these questions.
Okay. I want to start with me. I think I wrote them down. So, all right. On the U.S.-India relationship has not lost any momentum. I understand why some people might say that. I mean, I don't understand, but I understand some people say that, but I don't see it or view that in any way, shape, or form. The reality of it is you have a new administration that came in. We have this is not about India. This is about the United States in terms of trade. Okay, this is not geared. The president did not say, let's figure out a way to create, friction with India over trade. The president came in and said, we have a trade situation involving the U.S. economy that doesn't work moving forward. There's a huge imbalance that's built up and it needs to be addressed. And he pursued it from a global perspective. And so I can tell you as Secretary of State, there virtually is no country in the world that I could travel to that isn't going to raise the issue of trade, because we did this from a global perspective. The president approached it and said we have to rebalance U.S. trade. And one of the reasons why is, again, this is not about India. I'm not speaking about India. I'm speaking more globally. The United States was being deindustrialized. Okay? We pursued trade policies that left us in a place where all of the means of production had been outsourced in such a way that left us vulnerable. That had to change, and it cost us jobs. It created huge displacement in our country. And that needed to be corrected. There needed to be a rebalancing of how we approach global trade, whether not just with India, with the European Union, with countries all over the world. And obviously, now the difference is India is a massive economy. This is a big economy. We're your leading trade partner. We do a lot of trade with India, and so obviously, there's a big difference between, rebalancing trade with a country of this size and magnitude, with the size and productive means of your economy, versus a smaller country that maybe all they provide is agriculture, as an example. So I think it's just gotten caught up in that. The good news is that through this rebalancing, we are ultimately seek and believe we will arrive at trade arrangements around the world that are good for the United States, but also good for our trade partners. And one of those we hope will be India. In fact, we are on the verge of making that happen. We are hopeful that our trade representative can visit here very soon. We had an Indian delegation in the United States, I believe last week or the week before. We've made tremendous progress, and I think we're going to wind up with a trade agreement between the United States and India that's going to be enduring and it's going to be beneficial to both sides and sustainable in a way that addresses this national interest that we had. Beyond that, I would say that we continue to cooperate on a number of fields. As an example, when we came out with a Pax Silica proposal from the State Department, one of the first countries that joined was India. When we had our ministerial on critical minerals, the foreign minister was there, one of our key partners in that regard. It goes and speaks back to the strategic value of our partnership. This is an area of strategic concern for both sides, and we are partnering with it on it. And it is an example of what we wanted to continue to build on. So, in just the last few months, as I said, there's $20 billion of Indian investment in the U.S. economy, and that number continues to grow. So I think the relationship continues to be strong, and in fact, I believe by the end of this administration, it will be stronger than it's ever been. That's certainly our goal, and that's certainly what we're building towards. As far as our relations with other countries, yeah, we have relations, and we work at the tactical level, for example, and in many other ways with countries all over the world. So does India. That's what responsible nation states do. But I don't view our relation with any country in the world as coming at the expense of our strategic alliance with India, for the reasons I've outlined here already earlier today. On the question of the war and look, that was a long question and said a lot of things I don't agree with, and I'm not going to speak to military tactics simply because that's not my department. I will say this to you. When this conflict began with Iran, the goals were outlined and they were very simple. And they were very clear. We were going to destroy their navy, which we have done. We were going to significantly reduce their ability to to launch ballistic missiles, because that was the conventional shield they were trying to hide behind, and we've achieved that objective. And we were going to do damage to the defense industrial base so they couldn't rebuild all of these things. We've achieved that as well. Those were the objectives of Epic Fury. Those objectives were achieved. Those were the targets of our operation. And that's what they were targeted on. Okay? On the other hand, Iran likes to sponsor proxy groups of terrorists. And these terrorists don't care what they blow up. They blow up anything and everyone. Okay, this is who we're dealing with. Okay, this is an Iran that not long ago, through their Hezbollah proxies, blew up a Jewish center in Argentina and killed a bunch of people. This is an Iran that innovated the use of roadside bombs that killed and maimed a bunch of people, including American servicemen, but a bunch of other people. This is an Iran that has organized the assassinations and the attempted assassinations of people all over the world, including civilians and dissidents and people they don't agree with. There is no nation on earth that sponsors more terrorism than Iran, and they've spent millions and millions of dollars sponsoring terrorism and targeting individuals all over the world, and including civilians have been caught up in that. Okay, that's what Iran has done. They didn't spend their millions and millions on building roads and bridges and improving the life of their people. That's why their people are always in the street protesting, because their economy has been in shambles, because they don't invest in their economy. They would rather invest in Hezbollah. They would rather invest in the rapists and the murderers of Hamas. They would rather invest in those groups than they do in their own people. That's what Iran invests in. And that's what the world, that's what you should be asking me about. That's what the BBC should be covering. And that's what these other media outlets should be covering, is how evil these people are in Iran and the damage they've done to people all over the world. The world's leading sponsor of terrorism is Iran. And look what they're doing now. They are holding hostage civilian vessels, including ships that have now been stuck in the Persian Gulf. They've laid mines in an international waterway. And yet, despite all of that, the United States remains committed to finding a diplomatic solution to this crisis. But let's be clear who we're talking about here. We're not talking about some pacifist government over there, or some pacifist regime. We're talking about one of the most vicious regimes on the face of the earth and in modern history. That's what we're dealing with. And we were going to take away their missiles, we were going to take away their ability to make new ones, and we were going to wipe out their navy. Imagine if they had a real navy. What they have now is a bunch of small little speedboats that can lay mines and harass vessels, but they used to have a navy. Now that navy resides at the bottom of the ocean. And that was the objective of Epic Fury. As far as the question about democracy, I don't know what, I mean, democracy, every country that has a democracy has elections. And in every, I've been involved, I've seen elections in the United States where Democrats, I remember the lady from Georgia who lost her election in Georgia and said it was stolen from her. The bottom line is you have elections, and elections are conducted on the basis of rules and so forth, and sometimes those rules are not followed, sometimes those rules are not adhered to, sometimes those rules are played around with. Right now, Democrats are complaining about a redistricting process in the United States. But we're going to have elections in 2026. You guys cover it all the time. They're called the midterms. We're going to have elections in 2028. I was elected in elections when I was an elected leader. So at the end of the day, the democracies, as I said, rely on elections. Elections rely on rules. Those rules have to be followed. But at the end of the day, these are enduring democracies. I can tell you this, the leaders that are in the United States right now, President Trump was elected. He was elected with an overwhelming majority in the Electoral College. He was elected by winning the 7, not 5, but the 7 key swing states. He was elected in 2024 to carry out a mandate, and he responds to the American people as a result of it. And our leaders in Congress are the same. They have to answer to their voters. And that's the key. That's the key, and I talked about it before, the largest democracy in the world and the oldest democracy in the world. Our leaders, when we make decisions on the global stage, we have to go back and justify it to the American people. They have to go back and justify it to their voters here in India. We are responsible and accountable to the people, and they always say the same thing. They want to know why what you are doing on the global stage is good for the people of your country. And that's why I think it's important that there be strategic alliances with the largest democracy in the world and the oldest democracy in the world, because we are two countries that have to make decisions that are in the national interest because our voters demand it, but also that are in our mutual interest. And that's why this relationship is so valuable.